Okie dokie. All right, let's take a look at question 2013 July. It's question 6, and yes, the bar exam used to have 6 questions. It's now down to 5 for all you snowflakes and softies. Okay, let's take a look at the call of the question. I want to bring something, this is a really interesting, real interesting essay. And again, a little bit of a unique essay in a sense. And I can tell you, not too many people actually pass this one. And you'll see why right now. What intentional torts, come on. That's the easiest thing. It's the first thing you learn in law school. Can Paul reasonably bring against Doug? And what are the remedies he can reasonably seek? Well, for those of you that have gone to law school or taken different bar review courses or listened to like your bar review professor, you probably have been given a checklist, and you probably have a checklist of all the types of intentional torts, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, perfect. I am just going to list all the intentional torts and either rule them out or discuss, yes, they apply or yes, they don't. And guess what? You'll be repeating the bar again because that is the biggest way to fail. Checklists do not work, and I 100% prove it again and again and again. And in this essay, it's no exception. Because although they're asking about intentional torts, this is really not a torts essay. It's a remedies question. And that's what most people did not see. They do ask for what remedies can reasonably seek, but a lot of people don't actually process that because you see the intentional torts and you think to yourself, I'm just going to list battery, assault, trespass to land, trespass to chattel, conversion, false imprisonment. Bam, I list all those. The grader's going to be so impressed because I memorized a checklist of intentional torts, and I'm going to kill this essay. And then you get a 50. And then you say to me, Jason, why did I get a 50? And I'm like, because your teachers before were wrong. And I'm going to explain that to you. Okay. Again, there is no substitute for just understanding a fact pattern, being able to analyze it, and applying the law to the facts correctly. That's what you need to do. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on. There's a lot of things going on. This essay is an absolute beast. It is incredibly difficult. One of the most difficult torts/remedies questions I've seen, because it just required, there's just so many different things going on here that almost nobody saw, even though it was as plain as the words on the page. Paul owned a 50-acre lot in the country. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking Kansas, Wisconsin, like some just big lot in the middle of nowhere. 50 acres, it's a lot of land, Doug owns a smaller, unimproved lot to the north. And unfortunately, you can't really you can't really draw things out if you're going to take the bar online now. So, all right, so Paul owns a 50-acre lot in the country, and Doug owns a smaller, unimproved lot to the north. So we got Doug over here, and we got Paul's 50-acre right here. Okay. All right, so that's what I'm looking at here. And unimproved, and he's got 50 acres, so let's go. A stream runs through Paul's lot near the boundary line of Doug's lot. So I think we could probably got a stream right here. And this helps me when I do essays. I mean, I don't know if you're going to be able to do this on the bar. I mean, hopefully they used to be able to do scratch paper. You used to be able to do these things. Some people still are taking it in actual locations where they got accommodations or whatnot. They handwrite or whatever the case is. But most people will do it online, and I'm sure you'll figure out a way to make this somewhat happen. Although you don't really need to do this, it helps me kind of see what's going on. And this way, when I visualize and I can understand it, I can actually do much better with it. Paul has a house at the south end of his lot. Okay. And he uses it for summer vacations. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, this sounds like a real property question where you're going to have inquiry notice whether or not the property's where the property is located at. And he's using like a true owner for summer vacations. So a lot of real property essays will touch on that. But clearly they're asking about intentional torts, not about adverse possession. Although generally trespassing to land ends up being an adverse possession claim. So we're going to get into trespass to land, and you'll see that's one of the 2 intentional torts that are actually testing. Not battery, not assault, not false imprisonment. They're not testing the panoply of like the whole spectrum of intentional torts. Not even close. And that's what happens when people use checklists. They will just list all of them, explain why it's not a battery, explain why it's not assault, give the definition that they memorized. Oh, the harmful, contact to another, and they'll go into this whole thing about battery, and they're just wasting time because they're not actually addressing what the fact pattern is asking you to address because they use a checklist or a template or whatever kind of bullshit I can't even tell you how students are just so misled by quote-unquote so-called experts of the bar exam. And again, I'll prove it time and time again. Proof's always in the pudding. Can't dispute that. Okay, Paul's house at the south end, these for summer. He plans to build a larger house in the future. All right, so he wants a bigger house. I don't know, let's call it right there. Doug began to clear his land to build a house. All right, so he's got it unimproved. So to me, it's like there's a bunch of trees everywhere. Whatever the case is, got it. And I'm just drawing you guys the pictures. I wouldn't do this on the bar, but I'm kind of just doing it right now for demonstrative purposes. To do so, he had to fell trees and haul them to a nearby lumberyard. So, bulldozing these, and I got the bulldozer right here. However you want to do that. Going to the lumberyard. Okay. Lumber mill. He asked Paul, obviously Doug's going to be the defendant, Paul's going to be the plaintiff, or else we wouldn't, because it says Paul versus Doug, so we know that. They wouldn't do that to you. They wouldn't put D as the plaintiff and P as the defendant. They're not trying to confuse you. If he could take a shorter, to do so he had to haul trees in the lumber mill. He asked Paul if he could take a shortcut across Paul's lot to the mill. Okay, so apparently the mill's down here. And so you have to kind of this way. So he's like, hey, wait a second, can I just cut through your property? And Paul agreed. So we do not have a trespass to land because we have the consent of the landowner. So when we go, wait a second, because we're looking for intentional torts, and guess what? We don't have any right now. And it's okay, you will. On his first trip, Doug dumped the trees on Paul's lot near the stream. He's just dumping the trees right here. And the trees are probably sitting there in the stream and whatnot. And what they're going to do, they're going to end up blocking the water stream. You know what's going to happen. So by leaving the trees here without permission, now we're having a trespass to land. And by the way, for trespass to land, you have consent, but Paul gave Doug consent to go ahead and just, hey, cross his lot to make it easier to, go to the lumber mill. But he didn't have consent to drop there. So trespass to land is not only entering the land of another, but causing something to enter the land, or not taking something off the land that you're required. Like if you let me park on your parking spot, let me park in your driveway, and you're like, hey, you got to move your car by Friday, and I don't move my car, now I'm trespassing on your land, okay? And in that case, you could get nominal damages and any actual damages. Let's say you have to get the car towed or you have to pay someone to move it. That's actual damage. You'll get nominal and actual damages. And if I did so maliciously, then you could probably get punitive damages. You see what issues are coming up here? That's exactly what the examiners are getting at. Again, this is more of a remedies question. So I know we're going to have nominal damages. We'll have actual damages, potentially punitive damages. So trespass to land, mistake is no defense. Not that that matters. Mistake, no defense. The MBEs love testing that, by the way. So that's why I'm mentioning that. It's the intent to enter. Also, causing something to stay on the land. Just out of curiosity, is there, by the way, can you see, is there, I want to make sure this stuff is properly taken off. You don't know if you can pause this. I want to make sure that they can't see, students don't get confused when they're reading this. So there's not the background. I don't know how that's coming in. Okay. Hopefully you guys, everything's okay with that. All right. So causes something to enter or remain on the land. And here we have the trees. All right. So, dump the trees on Paul's lot near the stream in a wooded area Paul was unlikely to see. Oh, so he's hiding them from the guy. All right. Much less use. So that actually factors in. Don't forget, his house is down here. The stream's up here, and this is actually why it is a little bit helpful to draw on an essay. Not on the MBEs. You're not going to need to do this on the MBEs. Trust me, you're not going to need to do it on the MBEs. The older questions that were from like the 70s and 80s, yes, you need to do it because they were like essay questions where they had one long fact pattern and 5 calls of the question. They don't do that anymore on the MBEs, so you're not going to need to do stuff like this. Essays, kind of. All right, don't forget the house is down here, the stream's up there. We have 50 acres here. He's probably never even going to get up here. So it's unlikely going to affect him to be able to build his bigger house that he plans to do. And it's like I said, this drawing is really helping me understand who's who and what's what. But it's one of the rare ones where you're probably going to need to do something like that. I need to draw it out. I need to visually see it. That's the way my brain works. But I also know that I need to read slowly and carefully and really understand things and do the setup properly, because if I don't do this properly, I have no idea how to discuss it properly. So that's why when you hear, I mean, most of you are now taking the exam at home in the comfort of your own living room. But when you used to go to the exam center or even in law school, you remember in the classrooms where as soon as they say go in your final, you have like a 6-page final exam, and within like 30 seconds, somebody's sitting there just jamming on the keyboard. And you probably think that they're like so smart they're going to actually cali the class. That person's more likely than not going to fail. Because how in the world can you possibly read this, understand what's going on, and know exactly what issues are going to be discussed until you read it and read it carefully and fully understand it and grasp it and do stuff like this? I don't have the capacity. I'm not that bright. I don't know about you. If you are, congratulations. You probably don't need this course anymore. You can go do your own thing. But I'm not that bright, and I need to do this just like everybody else. Okay, so several of the trees rolled in the stream, blocking its natural flow. So even though we put the trees right here, the trees ended up in the stream, and now we have water gushing out. That's what we're going to have. Paul left for the winter. Don't forget, he's only here in the summer, so he's not going to be here for a good 3 to 6 months. As a result of the winter's normal rainfall, the stream overflowed, causing water to rush down to Paul's house. There we go. There's all the water coming down, and it's going to come pretty far, flooding his garage and damaging a 3-year-old motorcycle. Well, now we have trespass to chattel. Okay. Well, wait a second. He didn't intend to cause any harm to property. He didn't intend to cause any harm to the motorcycle. He didn't intend to cause any harm to the garage. So how are we going to get trespass to chattel for the garage and for the motorcycle? The answer is transfer and intent. And here's something that's interesting. All right, there's 2 big issues with transfer, well, one big issue and one minor issue with transferred intent. What about the fact that you're like, wait a second, this is a little bit unforeseeable, because don't forget, proximate cause breaks the chain of causation with negligence cases. It's like, wait, if this is so bizarre, so unforeseeable, I mean, we have a 50-acre lot, he dumped the trees, I mean, the trees rolled, they damaged the stream, we got the rainfall, and then it comes down, 50 acres to like flood his garage? That's not foreseeable. Or you can make a strong argument, you can say it is, or you can make a strong argument saying it isn't. But guess what? Foreseeability and proximate cause has 0 place for intentional torts. In fact, for intentional torts, transferred intent, you're liable for all harms, whether or not foreseeable. Proximate cause only applies to negligence, not for intentional torts, something that most people do not know. And I'll be honest with you, it's one of the things that I learned pretty recently, probably about 10 years ago, if you want to call that recently. But I didn't learn it in law school, and it sure as heck took a little while to figure that one out. So there's transferred intent. And another thing too is, even though the difference between trespass to chattel and conversion is the degree, although that really doesn't matter too much. In fact, trespass to chattel can be used in place of conversion. It doesn't really matter in all reality. But transfer intent applies to trespass to chattel. It does not apply to conversion. How about that? But I mean, so out of all the intentional torts, the only 2 intentional torts where transfer intent doesn't apply is for conversion and Oh, what's the second one? I want to say false imprisonment. I don't know if that's right. You got to look that one up in the outline. I'm sorry about that. I forget which one it's not. But I know remedy, conversion is one of them. That's the one that's here. It's going to kill me now. That applies to battery assault. It applies to 5. It doesn't apply to 2. Battery assault, trespass to land, trespass to chattel. Doesn't apply to conversion. Am I missing one? I know false imprisonment's there. I swear, I feel like I'm missing one. Anyways. Okay, then it must be false imprisonment, unless there's one that I'm missing. But okay, so of course, I'm not trying to remember or memorize all the different types of intentional torts, and this is like, well, Jason, well, how am I going to know it on the exam if I can't even sit here and tell you what they are? Because the fact pattern is going to tell me what they are. You don't think I can see a damaged motorcycle and water flooding a garage? You don't think that immediately triggers trespass to chattel? Now, if I had a girl locked up in a storage room or the clerk locked up somewhere, you don't think I could see false imprisonment? Or if a guy slugs somebody else, you don't think I could see battery? Or how about someone going, whoa, you took a punch at me and you missed? You don't think I could see assault? I know you can see it. You know I can see it. That's why I don't need a checklist, because the facts are going to tell me. I can see trespass to land when he left the trees there. And I can see that he consented. I'm like, oh, okay, well, you're talking about trespass to land here. So let the facts be your guide. This is why you don't need to memorize things. This is why you don't need to use checklists, because everything is going to be right in the fact pattern. Okay, so we go, Paul returned in the summer and learned what happened. It'll cost $30,000 to remove the trees. Now this has to go to trespass to land. Actual damages, we got $30,000, remove the trees. And the tree's presence on the lot has depressed its market value from $50,000 to $40,000. So loss in value is only $10,000. So it's the $30,000 to remove, but the diminution in value is $10,000. And this really turns into a type of contracts question, because in contracts you're going to see this all the time about what kind of damages are recoverable. In fact, it's the Jacobson Young case that you'll see on, that case literally has been tested 3 times in the last 21 years in contracts, actually the last 20 years, 3 times. It was in 2001, it was in 2013, and I believe it was a little bit later afterwards, like 2017 or 18 or something like that. So it was 3 times in the last 20 years. And they did the whole loss in value versus diminution in value of the property versus cost of repair. And courts are not going to award the cost of removal when the loss in value is so low. This is really this is exactly a remedies question. And a lot of people who took this essay initially did not even notice that the numbers were so important. Because don't forget, they ask about intentional torts, but the call to question also asks about remedies, and this is the numbers that they want you to discuss. There's a whole entire paragraph that deals with numbers, and so many people did not pick that up. Why? Because they're focused on their checklist, battery, assault, false imprisonment, and they're not catching what's actually really going on. Again, this is why checklists, templates do not work. You'll never find this in a template. You'll never find this in a checklist. Okay, and it says it'll cost $5,000 to repair the motorcycle and $4,000 to buy a new one. Well, here's the deal. Why in the world would they award $5,000 worth of damages to fix an old motorcycle when you could buy a new one for $4,000? Well, the answer is the only way that he would possibly get the $5,000 is if that motorcycle had like deep sentimental value, if it was a classic, if it was hard to replace or find a new one. I mean, sure, you could buy a new motorcycle for $4,000, but this might be a one-of-a-kind item. It might be something that your grandfather gave you. It might be something that's a family heirloom. In that case, they would give you $5,000. But under normal circumstances, it's going to be $4,000. That needs to go into your analysis. And you're like, well, how would I know that? Well, the numbers, common sense will tell you. Why would I give them $5,000? And you have to think to yourself, what are some of the reasons why they would give me $5,000 to fix something else? To fix something that I could just buy new for $4,000. Or there's got to be some kind of special attachment to it. And there you go, the sentimental value. You can make up reasons, and actually that's actually the law. Just thinking on your feet going, it doesn't make sense. And here, $30,000 removed versus a $10,000 loss in value. What should they give? Well, as long as it stops blocking the stream, I mean, his house is down here. I don't see the trees doing any problems right here. The trees might do some problems. If the trees end up blocking the stream and causing it to maybe do that next winter, well then yeah, you got to remove them. Clearly, you're going to give them the $30,000. But if the diminution in value is only $10,000 on a 50-acre lot, I mean, this is probably covered in, it's a wooded area anyways, I assume. So there's going to be trees everywhere. So the fact that you got a couple fallen trees here, the beavers will get them, like, you know, the woodpeckers will get into them, or they'll end up decaying over a couple hundred years or whatever the case is. So you're not going to need to give them the $30,000 to remove them if they're not going to cause any future harm. That needs to go in your analysis. Again, this is more of a remedies question than an intentional torts question, but I put in intentional torts so people can understand how to do damages for intentional torts on a much deeper level, which is what they're asking here. So I think that's all we got for that. There was one issue about mitigation here. Let's see, was there, and I don't know what that was, but there's no punitive damages because, you know, he made a bonehead move. It wasn't like he'd maliciously tried to screw the guy that's letting him use his property to make it easy, you know, to make a quicker, shorter stop to the lumber yard. Yeah. I don't think there's really a mitigation of argument. You know, like, well, he left for the winter, he didn't know, but that's not really a great argument. Although both selected answers did have it, ironically. So that's it. I mean, this is a really good essay to fully understand why checklists don't work and why you use the facts, numbers, and amounts and dates, and really try to understand the fact pattern of what's going on to get a better grade. That's what the bar exam is about. There's no two ways about it. Okay? We're done with this one. Question 2013 from July, torts question 6, torts/remedies. Thank you.